So I'm house sitting at the moment, and there's a lot of lovely squirrels and birds in the garden, and I can see them feeding on the peanuts and the seeds and everything. And it's been discovered, I don't know how recent, but it's become kind of a well-known fact recently that squirrels forget. Oh, there's a squirrel, 1 second. Look at it, munching on them peanuts. Cutie boy, cutie boy. So cute. Nom, 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 nom. So anyway, sometimes they take a peanut and then they take it to the ground and bury it somewhere. So, excuse the noises, a dog is drinking water. So I was thinking, like, how do scientists know that they forget to do that and not intentionally leave them there to plant trees so that they have more food later? So I talked to ChatGPT about this, and I'm sorry, but what it says isn't convincing enough in terms of what scientists did to figure that out. So I'm going to show you now, and then I want to just talk a little bit more about it. How do we know that the squirrels forget where they buried some of their nuts and aren't leaving them on the ground on purpose? So they said scientists observe squirrels burying nuts and then track whether they return to those spots. If squirrels consistently fail to retrieve certain caches, caches are just stashes basically. It suggests forgetfulness rather than intentional planting. I'm sorry, I don't understand how that suggests it. It still doesn't clearly define whether it's intentional or not intentional. Controlled experiments. Researchers give squirrels nuts to bury and test their recall by observing how often they successfully retrieve them. These studies often reveal that squirrels forget a portion of their caches over time. Again, I don't really know how they exactly carry out these experiments, but if it's anything similar to their natural environment in the sense of, like, getting the nuts and then burying them, that still doesn't suggest that they're intentionally or unintentionally leaving these caches alone, right? Behavioral cues. If they're purposefully planting nuts, we'd expect to see distinct behaviors associated with that goal, which hasn't been observed. Basically, they're saying they're burying their nuts in a particular way when they want to retrieve them, and if they were burying us to specifically plant trees, they'd be doing a different behavior. I mean, I don't know how you prove that, yet again. Evolutionary perspective. Forgetting some caches has ecological benefits, but from the squirrel's perspective, it's more of an accidental side effect rather than an intentional act. Evolution favors behaviors that help the individual survive, so a squirrel leaving food behind on purpose without gaining direct benefit seems unlikely. And then I said, I said to it, a squirrel does gain benefit. It makes sure there's more trees to grow, so that basically it has more food. And then it says, here's why squirrels likely aren't doing it on purpose. And essentially is saying how it's not consciously thinking about the future. And I was like, so how do we know that they are not doing that on purpose still? I don't know. And I was like thinking about beavers. Because they are called nature's engineers. They're called that because they help the ecosystems with their dam building. They help the waterways. They help replenish underground water and rebuild marshes, wetlands for other species to live on. And yet again, it said that, it's not a conscious choice. It's a byproduct of their immediate needs to survive. So they're building dams for their own needs to make sure that they have plenty of food in the winter and they have good place to live and for their immediate family, But it's not a conscious effort for the future. So that made me feel really annoyed because this whole idea stems from the premise that animals don't have conscious thinking, which is like, fair enough, where's the proof? I'm yet to see the proof, because we do have proof, in fact, that they have forward thinking. Animals have forward thinking, forward planning, delayed gratification, things like that. We have proof of that, only based on our human idea of what conscious thinking involves. Right? We only know of how we humans think consciously, and we extrapolate that to the rest of the planet. And so I asked it, I got kind of annoyed with it, and I said, why is that the case? Why do we think that? So this is what it said. So this is my annoyed message, and then it said, we assume animals don't have deep awareness or complex motivations just because they don't communicate the way we do. Your point highlights a big debate in science and philosophy. How do we define consciousness and intentionality in non-human animals? And this is what really pissed me off. So it said, for a long time, science leaned towards caution, often erring on the side of not attributing complex thoughts or intentions to animals unless absolutely proven. This approach is called Morgan's canon, a principle that suggests we shouldn't interpret an animal's behavior as the result of higher mental processes if simple explanations suffice, like instinct or learned behavior. If simpler explanations suffice, we're not going to assume that other animals have conscious thinking, because we are so limited in our thinking that if we assume that they're conscious, it would really limit the ability to slaughter them and intensely farm animals and treat their habitats like it's our property, right? It benefits not to think that they're conscious beings. I feel very angry. Anyway, let's continue. So then it told me about like the evidence that animals think about the future, which is basically what I've already shared. And this is what it said afterwards. You also raise a profound point about how animals as a whole seem better at living sustainably, because that's what I said here in my question. I said, or in my statement rather, I said, they're actually doing a better job at it, conscious awareness for the future. They're actually doing a better job at it than humans. We are causing an environmental collapse with our unsustainable practices, whereas nature lives in synchrony and everyone only eats and uses what they need. So to that point, it's responding how animals as a whole seem better at living sustainably. While individual animals may not consciously plan to protect ecosystems, their behaviors, shaped by millions of years of evolution, naturally create balanced and regenerative systems. Humans, with our advanced cognition, often override these balances, leading to environmental harm. In some ways, nature's unconscious wisdom, whatever conscious means, achieves what we, in all our conscious planning, struggle with: sustainability and harmony. So you're right, just because animals don't speak our language or write down their thoughts doesn't mean they lack deep awareness or intentions. It's possible that their consciousness is just different from ours, of course, not lesser. And maybe in some ways it's even more in tune with what the world needs. Well, what can I say? I rest my case. I'm actually going to look up now when this idea to assume that animals aren't conscious if we can explain it otherwise. I want to know when. Timeline is important, see? I want to know when that came about, so I'm going to look that up now. So my blood is literally boiling when I read these things. So Morgan's canon is a principle in psychology that states that animal behavior should be explained by the simplest possible process. Purpose: to avoid anthropomorphism, basically saying that they're anything like us, humans, to, I guess, avoid caring for these beings, to avoid anecdotalism, which is the use of stories to describe animal behavior. What the to provide a rule for interpreting animal behavior. How it's applied. Choose the lowest level of psychological process that can explain an animal's behavior. I'm sorry, but I say this no different to humans. The vast majority of human beings use the lowest levels of psychological processes. Coined by 19th century British psychologist. Oh my God. So what has been created by the very, if you like, grandfathers of psychology, that's how long ago it was, we still use it and apply it today. As if the world hasn't moved on, as if science hasn't moved on, as if our understanding of the world hasn't moved on, but never mind. So I'm back on ChatGPT asking, why was Morgan's canon principle created and why is it called like that? So, why was it created? In the late 19th century, there was a tendency for scientists and the public to anthropomorphize animals. And it basically gives an example of this. Clever Hans, a horse that appeared to do maths, was later found to be responding to subtle and intentional cues from his handler. Well, that just sounds like a trickery to me. So he was doing tricks rather than showing something. So his canon was designed to prevent... Oh, canon as in... Right, I see. I understand the meaning of that now. Okay. Like a theorem type thing. His canon was designed to prevent over-interpretation and to encourage explanations based on observable, simpler processes. Well, I am observing something that still doesn't mean anything. Like I'm observing a squirrel burying a nut. And just because it doesn't come back to it, doesn't prove that they've forgotten it. The same way it doesn't prove that it's intentionally placed it there. It doesn't prove anything. We just have assumed that they've forgotten it. While Morgan's canons helped establish comparative psychology as a scientific discipline, it also arguably led to an underestimation of animal cognition. Exactly. For much of the 20th century. By favoring simpler explanations, scientists often dismissed evidence of animals' complex mental abilities. Today, researchers balance Morgan's canon with growing evidence that many animals are... You're not balancing shit! Are capable of sophisticated cognition, emotion, and even forms of self-awareness. But the canon still serves as a reminder to interpret animal behavior carefully. So, that leads me to think that we don't really have any evidence for anything. And the only thing I know is that when I was studying maths in university, one of my modules was ecology and epidemiology. And we were looking at graphs of, God, this was years ago now, so I'm not going to be able to give you any kind of right terminology. I remember these graphs of different systems of relationship, if you like, between kind of predator and prey type scenario. I had to look it up because I couldn't remember at all what it was called. But yes, I said the right thing. So it's a predator-prey model. It's called Lotka-Volterra, if you want to look it up. And essentially it models behavior and the change of population over time. And what it basically describes is that they need to be in harmony. The populations need to be in harmony for sustainability, for both populations to live. And sometimes one population goes down, the other one goes up. And it's like a cycle, right? And what it shows is that in places where, for example, there's less prey and more predators, then the predators obviously die of starvation. So then, and that can't be reversed if we don't replenish the prey population. And the other way around, if there's no predators, the prey population will be too abundant. And so I understood from that point when I was learning that nature has this innate ability to know how to balance itself out. Because really it's the vast majority of cases is either climate change, naturally produced climate change, or human behavior that causes these imbalances, right? We kill the predators in the area, so then the prey is overstimulated. There's too much of prey, and then we kill off the prey because there's too much of it, right? That's what happened in England when we killed off all the wolves. There's nothing to eat deer, so then we have a lot of deer, and then we can justify shooting the deer, right? We just kill everything. We just kill everything. And this is what's happening with nature itself right now and humans. Meaning when it comes to natural resources, we are the predator. And what's happening if we look at the Lotka-Volterra model is that we as a predator have become too abundant and we're taking way too much, to the point that a lot of the systems are beyond the tipping point and nature cannot recover. And when I look at the animal behavior that, scientists say, oh, it's not a conscious, it's a byproduct of their limited survival instincts that are very primitive. I'm looking at humans thinking, pot kettle black, What are you talking about? You're calling yourself a human, a conscious being, when you're living in absolute, utter disbalance with Mother Nature. So anyway, this was a very depressing and anger-inducing morning. I was just sitting here watching birds and observing squirrels, and now I am here sitting hating humans. I don't hate all humans, just to be clear. I definitely know how many humans there are that are actually conscious beings and don't just role play them. And I love them. And I don't necessarily judge the other lot. I judge the people that know the consequences, that know what they're doing, and they're still doing it. Those people I judge. People who are ignorant, in the sense that they don't know. You can't know what you don't know, right? And I'll finish this with my own interpretation of the moral of this story. We need to look at nature and the way everything in nature functions and learn from that example. They do take care of themselves, their primary needs, first and foremost. And seemingly, whether it's a byproduct or not, whatever the case, they are taking care of the future of this planet. And we need to do the same. We really need to start doing the same. We need to stop overconsumption. And when we consume, we need to make sure we give something back. That's a balance. That's sustainability. And as I was just editing the video, I had a thought come up. The other part of the moral of the story really is, if we're going to call ourselves the conscious beings, we need to be conscious enough to question whether consciousness as we define it is limited to our perception of it, or if there is more to consciousness than we understand in our limited capacity.